Good morning, everyone, and welcome to those who are joining us online. My name is Surendra, and it is my joy to be with you today. I have served in India. I'll tell you just very briefly. Some of you I know, of course. Many of you I do not. In 2012, my wife Tushti and I were asked to come to India to at first serve in Gurgaon with Nayaswami Dhyanaji, and we were there for about 6 months when we were asked again if we would move to Pune, and there primarily with Nayaswami Jaya we served for 3 years, first out at the retreat center and then in the city center, and it was a great joy. We were there as the spiritual directors, and unfortunately then in 2015 Tushti became quite ill, and it became necessary for us to return to the U.S. And unfortunately also she passed away in March of 2016. It was actually a very blessed event, and we all celebrate what she brought to us, and of course the joy that she is experiencing now, I know, in her astral life. I now serve at Ananda Portland. I'm the director of the temple there and the teaching center, and this is just a wonderful opportunity for me to return to India for a short time and be with you and share some with you. I'd like to begin with a reading from Rays of the One Light, which are commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week is week number 40. The title is In Surrender Lies Victory. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. A case might be made for surrender as a path to victory in worldly conflicts, the way of passive resistance, for example, in preference to armed resistance. But our point here concerns a higher kind of surrender, the surrender of our deluded, egoic will to the wise and almighty will of God. Human will is, as Master used to say, guided by whims and limited understanding. The divine will is in harmony with every level of reality. Though the divine will sometimes appears to us at first to be wrong, it proves always eventually to be for our highest good. Human will is inconsistent. It leads us one day to success, another to disaster. The divine will, when we surrender to it completely, though it is not always easy to do so, always brings us deep inner peace and joy in the end. Jesus Christ demonstrated this perfect surrender to God's will in the Garden of Gethsemane, the night before he was captured and imprisoned, preparatory to his crucifixion. He went apart from the others to pray and asked them to pray also. But when he returned to them, he found them asleep. Out of his love for them, he excused them, saying, "The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." We all know the symptoms of human weakness, though we may excuse them in ourselves, saying, well, after all, I'm only human. But what are the signs of true strength? we find in all cases that these are the fruit of a life wholly surrendered to God. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, he lists many signs of these virtues in chapter 13. I'll read a number of them. This is a very long passage, and just so that we can focus more on the ones that are probably most important to us. Humbleness, truthfulness, and harmlessness, patience and honor, reverence for the wise, purity, constancy, control of the self. Our adverse fortune, with the will upraised to me alone unceasingly, with ever tranquil heart, loving deep solitude and shunning noise of foolish crowds, calm focus on the greater self perceived within and in infinity. These qualities reveal true wisdom, Prince, speaking to Arjuna. All that is otherwise is ignorance. And thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. I'd like to continue on this theme of in surrender lies victory. It's rather odd in this very materialistic world, isn't it? Such a phrase. We don't think of surrender as being a sign of strength. Society, in its materialism, encourages us to be strong in our competitiveness, in our seeking of power and of wealth. Surrender would seem to, to imply weakness and passivity. But Swamiji, in this passage that we just heard from Rays of the One Light, is thinking of surrender in very different terms. He's asking us to consider a number of questions. Is it weak to be humble? Is it passive to be humble? Is it a mark of strength to be ambitious or hard driving in our pursuit of worldly desires? Is it weak to be unaffected by how much money we have or how much we don't have? The answers we get from society and from our social conditioning are clearly of a different nature, different than from what Krishna has just expressed in this sloka from the Bhagavad Gita. Society wants us to look to it for our happiness. If you want to be happy, it says, you have to climb that social or corporate ladder. You have to seek worldly wealth and material success. It shows us pictures and movies and billboard advertising everywhere we look almost of so-called successful people that we are encouraged to envy and even to emulate. It's always interesting to me to see the movie stars who endorse so many different products, everything from toothpaste to beautiful automobiles, and I'm always amused they even endorse cement. What kind of cement are you going to order for your mansion or your empire that you're building? This is what society encourages us to do. It's probably a little more obvious in the West than it is here in India, but India unfortunately has begun copying a great deal of the West that is not necessarily for the best of our inner lives. But it's extremely difficult not to be caught up in this because we're surrounded by it. Every year, Forbes magazine publishes its list of the 10 wealthiest people in India. And what do we see in these photos of these people? We see, of course, financial wealth. We see expensive clothing, perfect grooming, expressions of power and of self-assurance. And surrender is not a word that comes to mind when we see these images. And if you were to ask any one of these 10, are you happy? You would probably get this answer, well, of course. Why would you even ask such a silly question? I have everything I could ever want or need. This is the cream of the crop in social terms, the people that we are encouraged to envy and to emulate. On the other end of the spectrum, we might think of a yogi sadhu wandering almost naked in the forest or along the Ganges, begging for food, praying to God. And if we ask the very same question, are you happy? We would get the very same answer, but for a very different reason. Well, of course I'm happy. Why would you even ask such a foolish question? I want for nothing. I have everything I need. Everything I ever need or want is provided in its proper time. Well, now we have these two extremes. Which of them even knows what happiness is? And a fair question, I think that we need to ask of ourselves, even though we are not one extreme or the other. We obviously fall somewhere in the middle. I would have to guess that there's no one here that's going to make it to the Forbes list of the 10 wealthiest, and probably not ready to go walking in the forest or along the Ganges, praying to God all day and begging for whatever you need. But the question is, in which direction are you moving? Where is your inner self? What is your definition of strength? And does surrender make sense to you as a part of that answer? Our affirmation today, awareness, it gets to the heart of the matter also. If your attention is on the agenda that society presents to us, your awareness is obviously outward, more in this sensory world. You're probably very busy and incurring a good deal of stress. This is a difficult world because, of course, we have to be in that world. But as Master always advised, don't be of it. You can be in this world and remain inwardly strong. And as I asked such sort of personal questions, which way are you moving? I ask this question of myself because, why are we all still here? We are here because we have lessons to learn. We have not yet attained that inner freedom, that complete surrender to God that will eventually, someday, enable us to join these masters. But we haven't gotten there yet. And I am so thankful to Ananda to have found this place where there is support for exactly what we are trying to achieve. This freedom from the likes and dislikes that keep us on this constant roller coaster of highs and lows. If we can engage in the world from that inner depth, from that surrender, then we are just so far ahead of the game, so to speak, and moving in the right direction. Is it bad to have money? Or to even have a lot of money? Of course not. The question is always, what are you doing with it? If you are hoarding or just, using that money to acquire possessions and wealth, well, you're stuck in that roller coaster because you're not really happy. And yet, if you are sharing, that happiness just comes naturally from within. Rajarsi Janakananda, I'm sure you are familiar with him, was a self-made millionaire. Today, he would be a self-made billionaire. And it was he who did a great deal to enable Master's work. Paramahansa Yogananda's mission in the U.S. and around the world to continue because of how he used his money in support of higher principles and of a higher consciousness. Fame, fortune, they're never going to be enough to give us what we really want. They cannot provide peace of mind, nor can they prevent the headaches and the heartaches that befall every person whose happiness is sought in outside pursuits, in those external desires. As the lyrics of one of Swamiji's songs tell us, if you're seeking freedom in a marble mansion, you won't find it there. For even when it's sunny, you'll be counting money. Keeping up that showcase, your face lined with care. And in the next stanza, he says, and if you're seeking freedom on a throne of power, you won't find it there. For though men all obey you, what if they betray you? Tense you'll be, and waiting for foes everywhere. We don't want to be involved in keeping up that showcase. It's very tiring. There are 5 qualities in particular. Each one begins with the letter A. And I invite you to consider these at the deepest level. Awareness, our affirmation for today. Aware of what? Aware of who you truly are. You are a child of God. Attitude. What is your attitude toward whatever you're doing, toward other people? Right attitude, dharma, must be the way that we lead our lives. Attunement. Attunement to God and Guru. That will guide us in the right direction. Acceptance. The ability and willingness to accept whatever comes our way. Because where is it coming from? It's all coming from God. Even the most severe tests are opportunities for us to learn, to grow, to get beyond whatever karma in any particular situation is holding us back. And the last is action. We can't be passive. We have to move on all of these other qualities in that right direction. one of the things that I love about Ananda is we're not asking for renunciation to be that of poverty, to be necessarily that yogi sadhu. It's all about moderation. Enjoy everything, but with the love of God and with non-attachment. Is anything really ours? Nothing is. It's all just being borrowed for the length of time that we're here. Discriminate. Is what you're doing bringing you closer to God, to freedom, to what you really want? I'll close with a story that has always been very instructive to me. It's a beautiful story. Last week, or at the end of September, we celebrated both the Mahasamadhi and the birthday of Lahiri Mahashaya, who was a great, great renunciate in the world, but not of it. And you may know that in a previous life, prior to the era of Lord Krishna, Lahiri was the great King Janaka, a king who was concerned only for the welfare of his people, a renunciate inwardly. He was known as Videha. Videha means dead, dead to the body. In other words, liberated of the body. And Narada, a great disciple, once asked him why he was called that. And King Janaka said, I will tell you, but first I'm going to ask you to do something. And he had a bowl filled to the very brim with milk. And he said to Narada, I want you to follow me around all day today, being careful not to spill a drop. And at the end of the day, Janaka asked him, Narada, what did you see today? And Narada said, my king, I saw only the milk. I was concentrating on not spilling a drop. And King Janaka said, you mean you didn't see the great procession in my honor today? The elephants, the chariots that were garlanded with flowers, all the dancing in the streets, you didn't see that? And Narada said, no, I saw only the bowl of milk, taking care not to spill a drop. And King Janaka said, ah, my son, now you understand. This, too, is how I live, being ever careful not to spill a drop of my thought of God, not to be distracted in any way from what is truly important in our lives, because this life is short and we want to move as close to freedom as we possibly can. My prayer and my wish for you in all of this is that you seek that consciousness in whatever you do. God bless you.